is the Rangers Journal now.
Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday night's edition of the Rangers Journal, where every night's a Rangers Journal night. As I said last night, when we took a night off to stew in our own wallow in our own self-pity after Sunday afternoon's result. So we have a couple of guests with us tonight. We have Doug and we have Mitch, and we potentially will be joined by another very, very shortly, hopefully. I'm your host, Gary. We are going to not talk about Sunday, because Sunday's been and gone. If you're anything like me, my plan usually is when these games happen, they come and go. I don't read any media, keep out of the way of most of the information, don't talk to them about it. And as far as I'm concerned, it never happened. That's the easiest way to deal with it. It's been gone, it no longer exists. So we will touch on it a little bit probably as the night goes on, but it's not going to be a main topic of conversation. So if anybody's expecting a rant and a rave all about the game a few days ago, that isn't going to happen. So 3 days on from Sunday, there is still that sense of kind of anger, frustration, a little bit of acceptance, which was quite worrying when we talked about it from people, how we thought the result wasn't too different than what we thought it would be. But now we move on. We're in an international week. 2 weeks from now, 10 days from now, there's a new game. So we're moving on and thinking about the future. And that's what tonight's pod is all about. So what we're going to talk about, if you think around without further ado, I'm going to ask Doug. Doug, if I was to ask you in less than 2 minutes, right? Short, sharp answers we're going to go for. Do we need to change our season, or is one bad result a knee-jerk reaction?
I mean, I think there's an element of that. Obviously, we are still early days in the season. It is still a new team and new players that are trying to come together. So there is an aspect of that I kind of touched on earlier. We don't want to kind of go too overboard with it. The concerning side of it, though, is just the repetitive nature of some of the issues. Obviously, while it's a new team, the manager has been there for, obviously it was there for half of last season. He has had a couple of Old Firm games now. And so the fact that there's still some repetitive issues is a slight concern. But yeah, it's still early days in sort of the development of the team. So he said it himself, he doesn't expect to be getting the best out of it until sort of next month or so. So there's a little bit of that to consider, but we do need to start seeing that. Transfer window's now shut. We've got the squad we've got, so we now need to start seeing that building and over the next sort of 4 games, which I think are all games that we should be looking to win every game. But I think over these next 4 in particular, after the break, we need to be looking at showing that growth and showing that development.
So to yourself, cheers, Doug. Mitch, do you think we are where we should be after 4 league games this season, or are we behind where we should be?
I think it's a kind of difficult question to give a fully quantified answer without giving it almost like a novel as an answer. Yeah. I think stylistically, we've still got a lot of the players getting used to each other, forming new relationships on and off the pitch with each other. But I do think this break internationally for the players that are new to the club but not away internationally, this is key, where you start to get them to do a couple of team building days out. You get them to get that personal relationship as well as professional relationship, and get the IKEA furniture built as well. But I think that's also going to be, we've got players that we've not seen yet that we've signed. Guys like Igamari, we've had a very, very tiny snapshot there. Don't get me wrong, some lovely touches. When he came on in the Old Firm, one of the very rare positives over the course of it. But I think stylistically we should know our identity really by mid-October, and that's me allowing current international break, a couple of games thereafter. Those relationships, if we're not playing well and clicking as a unit on the pitch by mid-October, be absolutely furious. Doug made a bit of an interesting point about the window being shut, so we've got what we've got. Might not strictly be true, because we still have the free agency market at the moment, which there are some interesting names in free agency at the moment. It's whether or not does the manager want to go and do something within that free agency market, maybe for a number 6 in there, or does he want to go look at right back cover, or does he look at something? Which I think, again, only he will know. You know, give me a crystal ball from under the desk, and I still couldn't give you an answer. But I think we're probably still 2 steps behind, but we've also got much more to go forward positively, as opposed to much more further we can go back. Is probably the long and short answer of it.
No, and I suppose that's what we'll come to maybe over the whole evening, is that there's 2 sides of the same coin, isn't it? You know, you going to Parkhead and losing isn't unique to this one team. It's happened to many teams better than the one we currently have. So that's not really the be all and end all of a season, but it's more to do with a whole host of factors which we will pick up on at different points and see whether there's particular themes that emerge, particular things that worry us, particular concerns we may have around both, as some of the people have suggested, the playing style, the players, the board, and all the other stuff that goes with it. So to give you a little bit of a peek, or to give the audience a little bit of a peek behind the scenes here, what happens is we get a title for a pod. So how do we change the season? That's it. We get a title for the pod, and then that was set very early at the weekend there. Some would say quicker than other pods used similar titles, but that's a different story for another day. We get set a title of a pod. We then get left our own devices to go away and think about how we're going to cover it. So for me, I thought we would look at kind of 4 different factors. No matter why, we look at the 4 pillars. I love the 4 pillars. It's the Rangers motto these days, isn't it? The 4 pillars we talk about a lot. So I'm going to pick on 4 themes and ask particularly Doug and Mitch to go into a bit of detail on each. So we have the players. We're going to look at the players, and I mean collective group. We're going to look at the tactics and confirmation. We're going to look at the leadership, and we're going to look at the fans and see how each of those different facets can do better, potentially, how they can all improve. So if we look at the players, as far as I'm aware, we have about 25 players in our squad, and Doug knows this sort of information far better than ever will. We've got about 25 players in our squad, and Clement talked last week about 4 different strands of players, doesn't he? Say it was the ones that were experienced and been there for a while, maybe a Butlins, Tav, Suter, etc. There was a experienced ones that he was bringing in, like Proper and Cherny and who's the other one? Barjani, guys like that. There was the ones that were young, high potential players like Hefty, Barron, Cortez, and then the academy ones he's bringing through like McCausland and Robbie Fraser. So he kind of talked about 4 strands of players. So my first question would be, I'll go to Mitch first. Do we have the squad within that 4 groups of players to change the season?
Yes. I think the talent's there undoubtedly, but I think the talent needs to be harnessed better. And I think probably some of it is, if we'd done some business, and I keep saying this to myself, if the transfer window probably had another week to go, we would have probably seen 1 or 2 more bodies come through the door. And I do think in that aspect up to Christmas, we might be a little bit light on the experience front. But you can equally flip that round and say, well, the next gen talent, those academy boys, those young players, you've got a chance right now between now and January to tell the manager, you don't need to replace me because I'm here. Go out there and nail a shirt on your own back. And if we're in a transition season, which if we're being honest, nobody at the club can turn around and say we're in a transition season because half the fan base would go bananas. But if we're being honest about it, with the signings that have been made, we couldn't fix every problem in one window. But I feel like the manager's made quite a good progress in fixing some of the problems. But because of the Euros and the window being slower than normal, he probably just ran out of time to get some of the other deals that he would have wanted over the line. So I think the base core of the squad's good, but I still think experience-wise, when I look at the midfield, for example, I see the likes of Diamande, Barron, and they're crying out for a bit of experience in there that, not to be crude or crass, Tom Lawrence isn't the answer for. Because Tom Lawrence, still has a fair bit to go in his own game at the moment. But I think the core group of players is probably still there, that they can turn the ship around. There's still boys there to come back, like Ridvan's due coming back, obviously, from his injury. We've not seen much of Igamani yet, so he's a bit of I would call it the great unknown at the moment. We don't know much about boys like Archie Stevens from the academy. What can he do when you put him in at the deep end? What can guys like Clinton and Salah do when he comes on the pitch? Not seen him yet. So there is still question marks on that front, but I still think the core is stable. And as much as there's probably one or two experienced players still within the team that some of us would be happy to see leave, myself included, I think you can't have everybody leave in one window and then leave the club with no DNA from the past there either.
I'm going to stick with you just because you said something a couple of times now that jumps out to me, and you talked about bringing all the new players in and creating a culture and creating a bond and creating relationships, and then you talked a little bit about you can't just evacuate everybody and bring a whole new team and expect that to gel. So I suppose how much do you think, or how big an impact do you think that may be having on just that team coming together?
I think there's probably a fair bit, to be honest. I mean, like when you look at guys like Igamani coming in, he's came from a non-top European league. There's very much a big difference in culture from Morocco to Glasgow. You know, let's be honest there. You know, he's got to acclimatise. He's got to get himself used to the peoples, the sites, the training intensities, the regularity of games. And we all know that underneath it, there's an absolute gem of a player. We've seen it, you know, from the videos we've all watched prior to him joining. But I think there's also an element of, in terms of the culture, we can't look at the culture of the last 2-3 seasons, because without to be doom and gloom about it, it's been a culture of not breeding success. It's been a culture of mediocrity. This is where you gel a new batch of players to say, for the next 2-3 seasons, this is your club. You hammer in the DNA and set the standards of what you will accept going forward, which is go out on your shield, you play to the best that you can, and you go out there and get results game in, game out, because that is the expectation on you at a club the size of Rangers. And to coin a bit of an old phrase, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's the level of expectation. It is uncomfortable. Don't get bogged down by it. Get comfy being uncomfy with it.
No, I wouldn't disagree. We'll come back to some of these things. So I'm not going to probe any further on it, and Doug will be patiently waiting in the background there. So, Doug, I suppose slightly similar point, but one of the things I was going to ask, should we be expecting more from the players if we knew at the start of the season we were in a rebuild as well? So I think so. Kind of two elements to the question. Because if we're in a rebuild, should we be expecting instant success from them? And I suppose, firstly, do we have the players, do you think, to give us success this year?
Well, I mean, I think there's a slight caveat in that, you know, obviously there's a handful of players that we don't really know yet because they're new, so we're not sure what they're going to bring, particularly the ones that are literally just in the door. But you know, I think it's a decent crop of players. I think they can perform better than they have been. They can certainly perform better than they did at the weekend. There's a solid group there, as you say. I think it's interesting that you talk about its shift from one to another. You know, a rebuild is more than just getting rid of the old and bringing in the new, because there's a bit in the middle as well that where the skill is for the manager is identifying players previously who maybe weren't doing well before, but he can do better with, or he thinks they can do better with other players around them. Because you can't get rid of absolutely everyone at once, because it's just not feasible to do so. So obviously there's a bit of that going on. You pick out the players that you think can do a job moving forward. I mean, you talked about the squad and the size. I'll take this as an opportunity to plug Friday's pod, where we are going to look at the squad in detail and sort of talk about them. I've currently got the squad count at 33. That does vary depending on who you're including. So, for example, if you go to transfer market, they don't include Budnauskis in the first team squad. I tend to include him just because I always include 3 goalkeepers. So, and then there's a couple of younger guys. There's a big question mark beside Hadji. So, but I've got 33. And we've reduced the age to an average, and the average age of the squad is now 24, which is a drop from what it was before. We obviously had quite a lot of older players previously. You're sort of
30
Goldson,
plus.
Yeah, you had Goldson in there. You had Lundstrom. Jack was getting on. Roof was getting on. So you had a lot of older players there. We've now got a lot of younger players. And even that age is swung ever so slightly. I've also done kind of average age for the various sections of the team. And for example, if you look at the fullbacks, their average age is 23, but that's pulled up by the fact that Tavernier's 32, whereas every other one is 24 or under. So, we've got a young squad now, and so I think there has to be a little bit of leeway there to let these players sort of gel, develop. If we're going to develop talent, when we have to allow for the period of development, which is going to involve not being at their best, is going to involve some mistakes. So the real challenge that Clement's going to have is, can he balance that with the unique demands of Rangers Football Club, which is you must win, and you must win every competition you're in, even the European ones if you can. So, Europe is the only one you get leeway in. So that's going to be the challenge. We've now got this younger team. We've got a lot of younger players, particularly in some key areas, like up front, for example. If you take Dessers out of the picture, it's a fairly young attack as well. So he has to balance that with the need for success, while also developing these players and letting them grow to win games, and then also for things like the transfer model.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, Tom. How are we doing?
Hi, boys. You all right? Sorry for that. Sorry for the late arrival. You all good?
No, at all. It's always better to make a grand entrance during it than the start of it. So I'll come back to you in a wee minute then, Tom. I'll fire a question out. I'll let you settle in for a minute or two. I think Doug was telling us we've got 33 players in the squad there. I'm not sure whether some of them are parents and guardians of the younger ones, but it's a quite a big squad on that basis. And to finalise that plug, so Doug's show on Friday is about squad assessment. He'll talk about those 33 players. He'll talk about some of their attributes. And I suppose one of the questions then, Tom, is, do you think the squad that we have now, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, as the saying goes, has more potential than the squad we had last year?
Yeah, the general consensus between everyone was we needed to get certain players out, players who had come to the end of their cycle and replace them with, younger, hungrier players. So we've certainly replaced them with younger players. We just need to see how hungry they are now and how much success they want. So I would certainly say that we got rid of the players that we needed to in the summer, the ones on big wages, ones that weren't really contributing. And like I say, we're just going to have to wait and see now if the people that have replaced them will, contribute and step up to the plate and help us be successful again.
So just finishing, so we're kind of looking at 4 areas: the players, the tactics, the manager, and the fans. So we're kind of coming to the end of the players bit. I'm conscious of the time. So the last bit on the players, then Mitch, I'll just cover you. Is that Clement's talked a lot about the players needing to bond and gel and reach October, November before they start to fully develop and integrate into the things. Have you seen anything particular from any specific players that gives you real confidence that'll be the case?
A couple. I'd say young Yefty looks like his ceiling looks enormous, but he still needs to learn a little bit about some of the dark arts in the game, where he's maybe not been in the trenches enough to get the battle scars of, we've seen it in pre-season where he get done with a couple of bits of skill where you go, son, just stick your foot in there and take one for the team. But again, that will come in time with experience and with playing at a better level than what he's been playing at previously. No disrespect to the Cypriot League, but it's a different level to obviously what we operate in. But I also think as well, there's a lot of optimism around Connor Barron. I would say there's also a lot, and as a homegrown player, and I think a lot of people are overlooking him, young Robbie Fraser. He's not really put a foot wrong when he's played. He's showed a bit of versatility by playing at left back and on the right wing. And also, I'm not going to lie, I've had a bit of a soft spot for the boy since he obviously came on against Hearts there, obviously, to make his first team debut. He didn't look weighed down by the jersey. And in some respects, he's played with that freedom of youth that you get from a player that is inexperienced but seasoned at a youth team level within the club, where you go, you understand the infrastructure of the club and you understand the enormity of the club. and when you go out and play and represent the club, you carry yourself correctly. But I think to Doug's point there about having 33 first team players, Doug, are you at it? Like how many academy players have you put in there? Have you put the Waynes in there?
Wait till Friday, Mitch. That's a plug. Wait till Friday, and you'll find out. So, look, finishing on the players, then I think I suppose the point of that is we brought in 11 new players. Can't remember off the top of my head, but something like that. Their average age is young. They've got potential in terms of the countries they play for, the nationality, the squads they're in, under 23s from Morocco, etc., etc. I suppose it's going to be a case of how quickly they become as good or better than the players that they replaced, isn't it? In some cases, Effie's an example. Tom, have you got an example of somebody you think that's going to shine through the season?
Yeah, as I agree with Mitch here. I like the look of Yefty. I get what he's saying about the dark arts, but unfortunately, it looks like any time he goes near a player, he's getting booked. You know, doesn't even have to do much, and he's getting booked. But Yefty and obviously Connor Barron as well. I think he'll grow. I think I've said it in another pod previously that he's started well, but I think due to his inexperience, he will have little dips in form, and we can't really get on his back too much. But I think he will again grow as a player and will be a natural replacement for Ryan Jack. So I am excited for some of these players that have come in. And again, I'd like to see more of Cortez, but we're going to have to just see what his injuries are like when he comes back again.
No, that's great. And I've seen a question here, people busy looking to make excuses for the players and manager. No, we're going to come on to the manager, we're going to come on to tactics, we're going to come on to other things in a little moment. So, and again, a final plug, because I'm not going to ask Doug who his favourite player is in terms of potential. He's going to tell you on Friday. Watch the show. Looking at the tactics then, so there's been a lot of discussion about the tactics or lack of tactics, or the shape and lack of shape, or whatever it may be. I suppose, Doug, from your perspective, do you see a plan and a shape forming, or should it be formed by now? And I suppose where we're at just now, is that part of the issue that people are complaining about? What's your thoughts?
Well, there's definitely a shape there. He's pretty wed to this 4-2-3-1. I think it's pretty fair to say. There's been questions as to whether we've got the players to maximise that, as well as maximise the type of play he's wanted. So, for example, one of the big ones has been the 10 position. A lot of people don't feel, and I would agree, that we have that we've had a good enough player to really make the best of that. We've obviously been playing Lawrence. Now that we've brought in Bajrami, I think that will make a big difference in that respect. He's much more suited to both the position and the style of play in terms of closing down, being active and agile in that kind of role. So I do think we will see a difference there. It fits in quite nicely. Actually, Curry's put a question in the chat where he's asking, are people too busy looking to make excuses for players and the manager on obvious failings that we've had to witness since the end of last season? So I think there is an aspect of that in terms of, if we're looking at the Old Firm in particular, the previous cup game that we had at the end of last season, we were much improved on the games before it. We were much more in the game. We were unlucky in that match to lose in a lot of respects. We had a much better grip of the midfield. Maida was practically non-existent in that game. So when I look at that and then compare it to the game that's just passed, where it's gone back to what it was previously, and all those failings reappeared, I am asking myself, well, what happened there? Has he not picked up the lessons from that game? Because we did play a bit more of a flat three in that match. We did harry more. I think, if memory serves, Raskin was involved in there. He played pretty well. Obviously, he's not available, so we can let him off of that one. But I do wonder to myself, well, were lessons not learned there? Because that is something that, for those games which will be swingers across the season when the points add up, he's going to need to learn those lessons. Part of it is the performance side that we've touched on. Obviously, the players just weren't aggressive enough. They weren't hungry enough. They didn't seem to want it enough, and that's one side. But there's also the tactical aspects as well. We talked about there was just nobody given cover for Tavernier, so he was left with Maida 101, which we know is a problematic area, and that led to a goal. So he needs to be learning those lessons as well, as developing tactically. But that's something we'll see in terms of the tactics. Now that he's got a couple more options there, we've got a new player who can play right back, who is solid, he can play centre back and right back. So he's now got what I would consider to be the first. I was going to say the first credible option, but that's not true because Sterling could be playing at right back as well. But it very much seems like we feel like Sterling's a midfielder, so there's now two credible options to potentially play right back. So are we going to see changes there? He said at the start of the season Tavernier wouldn't play as often, and thus far he's played 100% of minutes available. I've even said myself, I don't think Tavernier should play as often if he stays. So there's lessons to be learned as well as just getting things right.
Yeah, and if you're saying it, Doug, that's when you know it's time to do that, isn't it? In terms of that, no, I'd agree. And I've seen Mitch shaking his head about Sterling being a midfielder, but we'll not focus too much on that. But what I do want to focus on, and I suppose and get your thoughts on, is when you look at the way the Rangers have played, and I'm going to go back to, I think it was maybe the Hibs game, was it last season, when they won, and all the way from then onwards. It looks to me that they played a style whereby there's a element of risk and reward, very direct, very quick, but also leaving big gaps at the back. And they start to question, Mitch, I'm going to ask him to you, start to question, is that a deliberate style that he has, and is that a deliberate thing that could be a failing for us going forward?
I think to kind of answer that, it comes down to that whole Jurgen Klopp philosophy of heavy metal football. And I think even now, with the changes over the summer, we're probably still a bit too short in quality to get away with that. We can't go kamikaze up the pitch and then leave ourselves, we can't leave ourselves more holes in a block of cheese at the back because we've not got the players to get ourselves out the trenches. I still look at what we've seen at the weekend there with John Souttar, one of the biggest failings there that I've ever seen from a centre back. Trying to play a pass across the back when you've got two players of the opposition sniffing right up your ear hole. Football 101, hoof it out your box. Simple enough. That's how you get out of that mess that you're in. If the ball gets stuck into your feet, hoof it out. Don't care where it goes, get it out into the stands, give you a chance to rebuild. I think high risk, high reward. I think we were too guilty, I think, a lot last season of probably showing teams too much respect with not playing with that. We are Rangers and we are better than you. We will show you over the course of the game that we're better than you. I think we were a wee bit too guilty at times of playing within ourselves. Could that be a personnel issue, or could that be the fact that the cupboards were bare and players were running on fumes, so had to play within themselves because they knew that come game 3, game 4 of that cycle over a 2-week period, they knew that they had to manage themselves on the pitch to get through that period of fixtures that were going back to back and players were dropping like flies. I think there's a point there that I think Doug had just made there about personnel on the park. I actually think in the last old firm of the season there, Nico Raskin made a huge impact in that game that really, really went unnoticed of how well he kept Callum McGregor at bay over the course of the game. He went out there safe in the knowledge, my job is don't let him go past you. If I let him go past me, it lets their midfield control our midfield because he's just going to bob it about, wing to wing, and they're going to play their nice wee 1-2 touches against each other and get into the back. And I think Connor Barron, this is maybe where the lack of experience at this level kicks in. And again, I really like Connor Barron. Really, really like him. But I think it kind of showed a little bit at the weekend where he was guilty at times, I think, of running about like a headless chicken, doing everything. But I think that was also down to the fact that players like Yefte, Sterling got yellow cards so early in the game. So they were almost, I wouldn't say scared to put a foot in, but if you go in too heavy on somebody, it's a derby game, sorry, but go and leave one on somebody at the beginning. But the problem with that is that when you get a yellow card, you have to be careful what you do then for the remainder of the game. And given it's Scottish football and it's an Old Firm game, let's be honest, the referee's going to turn around and say, tell you what, you were a wee bit too overjoyous there. Thanks for your time. There's a red.
So I'm going to pick up just John's comment there, because that's when you were talking about hoof up at the park, I was thinking of match of the day and all these different games and people losing goals because they're playing too much possession football at the edge of the box. So I'm sure there's a time and a place for both elements of it. Some days you do need to hoof it.
Absolutely.
Some days you need to play it.
I'm probably a bit old-fashioned in the respect of a defender's job is defend. The only area of the pitch you need to defend is your 6-yard box and your goal line. If a ball is stuck at your feet and you know that you're up a certain creek without a paddle, get it out there. Clear your lines, give everyone a chance to reset. We start again, especially at such a high-stakes game.
Yeah.
When you're playing a game like that, you can't take risks to that extent of, tippy-tappy football at the back. Sorry, sometimes a hoof up the pitch is what you need to do.
Okay. And we're touched on the Celtic game. Bear in mind, I don't like to think about it, so we'll not focus too much on that, and we'll come back to the overall tactics. Tomo, so we've talked a wee bit about the shape. Just to kind of conclude the tactics part, there's been a clamour, lots of discussion, lots of going on about let's go back to 4-3-3, let's go back to a narrow midfield where the way Gerrard played with Kamara, Davis, and Jack. Do you think that the formation is a particular issue that formation, the style, and is that something that we should be looking to change, or do need to change, or may have to change?
I think that the formation, tactics, whatever we play, we need the players need to get back to the basics of putting a shift in. Doesn't matter what tactics or what formation we play. And as I say, I'll go back to the game on Sunday. The Celtic are a better team than us at the minute. There's no denying that. But their players work with bollocks off. Their third goal came from Kyogo running 50 yards back to tackle Tom Lawrence. He then meanders up the pitch, gets involved in the play. And even then, Celtic have got 3 players. We've got 6 back and nobody goes in to make a tackle. And when we do get the ball, one Celtic player, I think it was Maeda, harasses McCausland and gets the ball back. Our players need to be putting a shift in. We can sit here and talk all day about tactics and about what formation, but if players aren't going to be putting a shift in, it doesn't matter what formation we have. I mean, I thought on Sunday, I was happy with the midfield. It was clear as day last season that they overran us in midfield when we had a number 10 and we had an extra man. So I was happy with the midfield, but again, the deficiencies just showed that we were almost powder puff in the tackles. We weren't getting about the park, and they just wanted it more. Whether the players freeze in that atmosphere at Celtic Park, I don't know, but you just notice it all over the park that Celtic, when they attack, we're attacking 4 or 5 players at speed. We attack, there's maybe 2, 3 that are strolling about. Maybe something will happen, but.
So, Tom, can I ask a quick question on that? I'm just picking up that point. And so we have Diomande, Sterling, and Barron played in midfield. Now, all 3 of them are renowned, I suppose, aren't they, from fans for their energy, their speed about the park, the way they move about quickly. So, invariably, they suggest that they have more of that potential than Celtic. So, the midfield, looking at 32-year-old Callum McGregor and the way the other 2 play. So, how is it then that you think desire is the reason that they were able to?
I think so. I think their players seem to come in and fit in straight away. They get into the club. When they play against us, there's no niceties, there's no nothing, Whereas with us, I've seen it on Sunday. There was players helping their players up off their backs when they were on the ground and stretching them out for cramp and that sort of stuff. And it's a mentality thing. I mean, the game on Sunday, you could have just stuck a videotape in of any of the Old Firm games from last season, and it's the same. It's a rerun of what we saw. But we did make chances. We did have chances, but again, our attackers just seem to turn to amateurs when they get into the box or around the box and can't seem to, get clean strikes away. But my main worry last season against them was that we didn't have the legs in midfield. And then when I saw the midfield on Sunday, I thought, we've got legs in there now. We're going to be able to match them for the fitness, getting around the park. It should, but after 15 minutes, basically when they scored that goal that was disallowed, we just seem to go to pot. So whether it's a mentality thing, I honestly don't know, Gary.
No. So I'm going to move on to the different section now. So in terms of players, we're saying, just to paraphrase, if I remember rightly, players we think have the potential to grow and be better than the players we had, but it's going to take time. I think with some of the new ones, what the issue from a tactical point of view is, tactics shouldn't really matter much, mentality should. That's kind of the gist of where we're at so far. So looking then, and I've seen some questions here, looking at leadership, and I'm not talking about leadership groups. If anybody wants to hear this whole leadership group, for some reason Rangers seem to obsess about a leadership group I don't hear other teams talking about. I'm talking about leadership in terms more of the manager, the chief exec, and the board, right? So I'm going to talk about them. But I'm going to ask one quick question about leadership group, because it's such a hot topic. How much influence, Doug, do you think the leadership group has over Rangers? Do you know, because at times when you lose a game, it's the leadership group's fault. When you win a game, they're not mentioned. And I'm always quite interested how big a role that actually plays.
It's an interesting question, because I think it partly depends on the leader themselves. A good leader will make a difference to the team. But I do think that people put more into it than there actually is. There's only so much a person can do in terms of cajoling and giving confidence and things like that. You know, there still comes down to responsibility for the individual. And leadership doesn't just come from the leadership team. There should be leadership ideally throughout your team. I mean, just when Tomo was talking there about sort of the niceties, things like that, it made me think of Scott Arfield, who was a player that I thought made a difference in Old Firm matches, not necessarily through being like the best player on the park, but he had that little bit of bravado about him, when he was just like, I do not care about you guys in the slightest. He had that bit of, even if they were winning, he'd still laugh in their face, and it was just that little bit of mentality of I'm not afraid of you, and I'm getting in regardless. And I think we missed a bit of that. Obviously, you look at players like Morelos, who had that. He took it too far a lot of the time. But you do need some of that, in the team when you're playing, because Celtic certainly have swagger and confidence, and so you need to break that by saying, "Oh, you scored. Who cares? We're gonna come at you," and we, that's what we lack. In terms of leadership going up, like you said there, I am a big proponent that leadership starts with the manager, and that's something I touched on in the preview, where I do think that Gerrard made a big difference in that regard, because he definitely had that kind of ambivalence for the enemy, if you like, and that in fact, that's the wrong word completely. He really took on that idea of kind of it's not something that I particularly 100% on board with, but that kind of hatred, if you like. And you saw that spill out from him in very passionate ways, whether that's right or wrong, depending on your point of view from the manager. But I do think, again, that's something that has lacked since he left, and we need to get a little bit of that back. And then obviously stepping back up, there is a scope for that leadership and that overall culture that has to come from your CEO and board level. We still lack a CEO. Was it the end of July that we had the Bennett video where he said that was coming soon? We're 6 weeks on from that now, and to me, soon is within 6 weeks. That really needs sorting, because that is the person who is going to be ideally the key person that's going to set the stall of the culture of the club moving forward. Because what I want to see is the board stepping away from the day-to-day decision-making and just doing their businessy stuff, and putting a CEO in place who will run the football club, make the decisions, put in the other positions we need, be that academy heads or directors of football, whatever else. So that person is going to be a key person who, from the very top level, will set the culture of the club, which has to be, we are winners and we will win, and nothing else will be acceptable. And to me, you're letting that continually drag on is delaying getting that culture in place. because you can do all sorts of stuff now, but once you do bring that person in, they might change stuff, or so that's a really key point, is you need to have it running up the pillar, to use your own terminology. There needs to be an aligned pillar there of everyone working together and pushing together the culture of we are a winning club. That is what defines us, and we will accept nothing else.
Ideal, which leads me very nicely on to my next question. I'm going to come to Mitch now in this one. So I'm thinking now, just as Doug was saying, Big Phil's been here a year nearly now, I think. Big Phil's won more trophies than any of us have, sitting in this wee box. So, having been a proven success as a manager and a player, how would you view his first year of his tenure, and how, not culpable is the wrong word because we've won a trophy, but how has he delivered?
I think he's made one key decision, and Doug, I'm going to kind of burst the bubble that you're on a little bit of a second ago. The biggest change for me that he should have made in the summer is the captaincy. He's talked about start of a new cycle, new era, breaking in a new era for the club. That includes breaking in a new era with a new captain of the club, somebody that's going to be part of the long-term vision of the club, not a player that's approaching 33 years old that is not going to do another 2, 3, 4 seasons at the club. That for me is ultimately a failing, and that's taking personal decline, etc., behind player attributes, etc., aside. I think the biggest thing that he should have done was change captaincy in the summer, and that's something that should have been done. In terms of his overall performance in the last year, I think given how last season went in terms of bodies hitting the floor, quicker than we know what to do with, it's hard to really gauge that first kind of, we'll call it 2/3 of a season, because the measuring stick without a fully fit squad was difficult to put a barometer against. He brought us back into a title fight that we had no right to be in, which ultimately it fell on its backside. But again, we found ourselves in a position that we should have, in a fight that we shouldn't have been in. But again, that speaks credence to the fact that he knows what he's doing tactically. We had a deep European run, we've done well, and he laid a foundation. I do think, to echo what Doug said, though, I do think he's had failings this summer from a boardroom level. In terms of, I genuinely think he's been overpromised and underdelivered by the board in terms of budgets, strategy, and maybe what scope that he's got himself, obviously, in terms of, what players can and can't go, what players stay, don't, and in terms of maybe just how ruthless he could have been. But I would have, if you asked me to give it a rating out of 10, he's got silverware. There are still room for improvement, but this is also still just the start of his team that we're seeing.
Right.
I think probably.
I'm going to come back to you, Mitch. I'm interested in something to say. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I want to ask Tom and Doug the same question. 8 out of 10, you're saying over the course of his first year. 7 out of 10, you're going to 7?
7.5.
So relatively successful over the first year of his tenure, in your view, which isn't necessarily the view of the full parish across the fan base. Tomo, very just quickly, your take on his first year and a quick rate.
Yeah, I don't think it's been terrible. He's come in after Beale was sacked. He's been left with a lot of deadwood in the squad. He has to shift that. He has to get his own players in. Some things could have been better, but I think he has done all right. And we can't be in this mindset of just sacking managers after 3 or 4 games every season. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same situation again next summer when a new manager who's come in will want his own players in, and we're starting the cycle over and over again. So I think there is going to be some short-term pain here, and we're going to have to just ride it out. It's not an overnight project, unfortunately.
And Doug, just to finish this bit about the manager of then, so Mitch is 7.5 or 7. I think it's a very good rating. Tom was, I suppose, just identifying some of the failings. Seen some of the comments there saying that he's failed worse than Beale potentially. Do you think that people don't care what happened last season in terms of injuries and stuff like that? We are where we are now, and he needs to succeed very quickly.
Yeah, there's an aspect of that. At the end of the day, fans want success and they don't really care about the rest. I do think there's the caveat that, you know, if you're comparing Beale and Clement, sorry, his name's totally escaped me for a second. There's a slight unfairness in that, just because I think the measure of what we're asking Clement to do is bigger than what we were asking Beale to do. Beale was kind of adding on top of an established unit, whereas we've brought Clement in and told him to clear the deck. You know, I can't remember who it was. Someone mentioned that we've regressed, and I think there was a slight inevitability to that because of that task. There was always going to be a little bit of 1 step backwards and 2 steps forward, 2 steps backwards and 1 step forward. Sorry. And to Mitch's point, I don't necessarily disagree. As much as my love for the man is known, I don't necessarily disagree that having made such a point of the change in era, that one of the things he could have done to ram that point home is to have appointed a new captain. What I kind of think has happened is I kind of think that they expected Tavernier to leave, and therefore the captaincy would just naturally transfer. And the fact that he hasn't has therefore left that as a kind of hot potato. So you can argue that the big thing would still be to remove that, and then I think you kind of maybe have a bit of an issue there as to, well, you know, are you still going to play Tavernier if you take the captaincy off him? Does he then sit at the back? Can you have someone that's on almost 40 grand a week sitting doing nothing if you're not going to play him? So there's perhaps the club potentially were left in a conundrum when Tavernier ended up not going anywhere. And given all the other stuff about wages and whatnot, maybe there's something there. But I do think that is a big decision he could have done. And I wouldn't have necessarily been against it, because I do think that there are positives to that as well. But yeah, I think that we have to give him a little bit of rope, because we've asked him to do a huge job. We asked him to basically get rid of practically the entire team. Half the team that's still here, people still want rid of. A lot of players like Davies, Matondo. I know Davies is on loan, but there's a lot of players there, obviously Tav included, that people still want rid of. So we're still asking him to do that job. So we're going to have to give him, if we're still asking him to do that, then we have to give him a little bit of rope in order to do so. And unfortunately, that might involve a bit of pain in the meantime.
Can I throw something back to you on the Tav point? If he strips the captaincy off Tav, does it not make it much easier to drop him for certain games? Because then you're not dropping your captain. You're dropping an experienced player to allow the development of a Sterling at right back, or a Devine, or, you know, the new lad that we've signed from Ajax. At that point, there's an open conversation to say, in certain big games, Tav will play because he has that experience and he's earned the right to play. Versus in other games, we're going to see a Sterling, or we're going to see somebody else in at right back, because they are the succession plan to the future. That doesn't mean Tav can't be part of your leadership group, because he's an experienced player with nearly a decade at the club. But is it not much easier to drop somebody who isn't the captain? Wages aside, it's much easier to drop that, and it becomes much less of a focal point when he is out the team for a game or two to allow somebody else in.
Can I answer that? I don't want to spend a lot of time on Tav, Doug, so I'm just going to answer it very quickly so we can move on to something else. To me, very bluntly, I don't think the captaincy matters a great deal in terms of the whole of these things. I don't think it's that big an impact on performances, on play, on how the team performs. He said at the start of the season, Tav should only play 40 out of 60 games or so. And if you're not playing, you're still the captain. So I don't think it makes a big difference in terms of whether you remain the captain or not. What I want to do for the next 5 to 10 minutes really is move on to that fourth pillar, because you can't have a 4 pillars thing and miss out the last pillar. Then crumble. Maybe that's where we're at in terms of Rangers at the moment, actually, when I think of it. So the last pillar I'm going to talk about is the fans. And I'm going to come to you, Tom, first then. So the fans are obviously crucial to success, right? There's obviously been a disconnect over the last 18 months, 2 years. You know, you could argue in some cases. What do you think the reason for this disconnect between the club and the fans is? And how do we, in terms of change of season, how do we change our season and get to a point when that's not the case?
It's a good question, that, Gary. I mean, I think the main thing is success. That's what Rangers are built on. We're built on success, and that's what the fans ultimately want. We're sick of being, second best and maybe winning an odd cup here. That's not us. We're ones to challenge for the league. I think the other thing as well is, the board are a little bit out of touch. Things are going on, and you see stuff on social media where, if we're wishing happy birthday to someone and we're like, don't care about it. Who's coming in? Who's leaving? I think there needs to be a bit more dialogue from the club about what is happening. Again, the fiasco with Ibrox and having to use Hampden for a few games. There was no real dialogue between the fans and the board, and people have paid up for the season tickets. What's happening? Where do I sit? All these uncertainties. And it just makes it look amateurish. We had a pod last season about Dundee and the amount of games that were called off, and quite rightly they were called out about it. But that stuff there with Ibrox made us just look as bad. But I think the fans, as I say, we need to just have a little bit of patience. What I would say is, I remember the first Old Firm game of last season when we lost 1-0 at Ibrox. I genuinely finished watching that game, and at that point I was conceding the league, because there was nothing in that game I could see from Beale's side that showed there was anything going forward. There was nothing to give me any hope. At least at the weekend, there were tiny little bits. We were making chances, we just weren't taking them. There were tiny little nuggets there, and as I say, we can't just keep sacking managers and then hoping the next one's just all of a sudden going to come in, sprinkle a little bit of magic, and the same players are all of a sudden going to turn into, prime Messi or prime Ramos. It's just not going to happen. We do need to have a bit of pace. It took Steven Gerrard 3 years to win the league, but for COVID, he could well have been sacked the season before we actually went and won the league. So I think all of us, we just need to take a little step back and go, let's just let the manager do what he needs to do, and hopefully it'll come to fruition.
No, that makes sense. I'm going to come to you that much and expand on that point a little bit, if that's all right. Do you think, and this is slightly controversial probably on a pod, do you think the fans are actually hindering the club at the moment, in the sense that there's obviously low attendances at Hampden's costing us money? You've got the negativity around the stuff that happened at the weekend after outside Ibrox, a whole host of other things around there. Do you think that's actually having a negative effect and actually hindering progress in any way? If we're looking at how do we change the season?
Well, cheers for putting me in the hot seat, Gary.
Yeah, fire away.
I mean, I can already feel about 70,000 beady eyes on me right now. I think to say that fans are hindering progress is probably a bit too strong. I think what there needs to be is less reactionary behaviour from fans, and a bit more sensibility and a bit more maturity from fans. We're talking about wanting the team to mature, grow and be better and go on to be a successful team. That comes with time, patience and a bit of understanding and a bit of care from the stands, as opposed to first time a goal goes down or the first time something doesn't go our way, hitting them with, complete vitriol from the stands. And if you're a 21-year-old player that's new to the league and new to the system here in Scotland, how the hell do you think that makes you feel when you've got 40,000+ people booing you at not even your home stadium? That can't be that great a feeling when you look at. I'm a big advocate of looking at player well-being, and at that point, sure, players can take that maybe for one game. Can they take that for 3, 4, 5, 6 games in the trot without that impacting their form, their mental preparations before a game? There needs to be an understanding and a bit of switch the lights on a bit from fans. Screaming and shouting at the players in the park isn't going to help results, and it's certainly not going to make results any better. Screaming and shouting at the people in the boardroom level, by all means, crack on. That's where the anger should be directed. But I think there needs to be a bit more, an element of being more measured as fans about if we're honest with ourselves, we accept that this is a transition season, as the summer transfer window shown. We've got the January window to come, where undoubtedly 2 or 3 more players will come in, and the bones of this team start to take place. These players that have come in need support, they need attention, they need to feel what it's like to be at Ibrox, and they will see that obviously against Dundee in the weeks to come. But I think, fans, Curry's mentioned here, fans are Rangers, which is correct. But at the same token, fans can also really, really help a team on the pitch, as well as be detrimental to players on and off the pitch. And I think I get the disconnect at the moment between ourselves, the boardroom, and everything else, but I feel like some of that anger's getting laid out at the wrong door. Does that make sense?
No, that does. And I think what we'll do, Doug, I don't know, you're good at these. Can we pin a headline? Mitch says the fans are to blame, right? That's what we'll go with. I'm looking, right? So we're coming to the end of the pod. I'm going to get you to all answer one quick fire question each, right? So just literally a minute or so at most. And Doug will come to you first because you've been patiently waiting. So we're a month into the season, we're at the start of September. If I was to ask you, as at today, what a successful season will look like at the end of May, what would it be? Based on what you've seen so far, not just based on fantasy.
Well, I mean, treble is the only answer.
Right answer.
At the very minimum, we have to win a trophy. That would be the absolute bare. That would be the only thing that stops the manager potentially getting sacked. You come at the end of the season with absolutely nothing. I think you're starting to get into that part of the equation. But I mean, the rules don't change, I'm afraid, for Rangers managers. The goal is to win every competition you're in. Asterix will let you off maybe in Europe. So that's the thing. Just touching on Thomas' point from earlier, if Sergio Ramos is the answer, I believe he's still available on a free, so we can get him in. I'd really like to actually, though, for my final point, touch on something that Curry also said in that same point. These are well-paid men, not babies. I actually think that the fact that these are young, a lot of these players are young and very well-paid, actually increases the fact that they're not, I don't want to say not men, that's not what I mean, but footballers are in a way infantilized by the lifestyle that they now receive. I mean, if you'd been earning 20 grand a week from the ages of 17, 18, 19, how responsible and mature, mentally or otherwise, would you be? And these footballers are not, and there are examples of this. We did a pod, I think it's a couple of months ago now, about what Mitch was talking about in terms of player well-being and looking at clubs looking after players. And I'd looked into the player liaison officers, and some of the stories they have are absolutely crazy. Like, players don't know how to do the most basic of things, like setting up bank accounts. And I mean, we all had a bit of a rage and a laugh at Proper apparently setting up stuff from IKEA. Now, he's older, so he should know better, but if you apply that kind of idea to a lot of these guys who are in their early 20s, a lot of them will be lacking basic skills, and that affects how you are mentally as well, in terms of your maturity, your ability to deal with these things. So I think there is a point that we do need to account for there. But that aside, I think in terms of how fans should respond, I mean, they're right to be angry. I've said it already before. I totally disagree with abusing players in the street. Shout at them from the stands. That's where that's for. But we should at a minimum give Clement the measure that he himself has set. So he said October, November, we'll get the best of this team. So therefore, we should give him to October, November, and by that point, if it's not going the way we feel it's going, if they haven't clicked into full gear, then that's when we can start saying, right, well, you now deserve everything that you're getting, because this is when you said that we would be in gear, and it'll no longer just be irrational fans, quote unquote. It'll be us holding them to account for his own words.
Yeah. So Doug says a treble, or at very least a trophy, right? So Tomo, if I was to say what's the biggest barrier to achieving that goal at this moment in time, in your view, what would it be? I think I probably know the answer based on some of your comments earlier on.
biggest barrier would be Celtic. To be brutally honest with you,
within Rangers, what's the biggest barrier?
Within Rangers, as I say, I think just the players either growing together and becoming a team, getting a settled starting 11 where people are playing in positions regularly, and we're seeing a regular 11 on the team. Partnerships, the centre back areas, regular centre back pairing, regular midfield pairing, that spine of the team. So genuinely, the biggest barrier will just be the players and how much they want to achieve. Are they happy, having the kudos of being a Rangers player, getting their wages every week, beating the likes of Ross County 5 or 6-0 and occasionally winning a trophy, or do we want to become serial winners, winning trophy after trophy, and getting that status amongst Rangers fans? So I think that really is what it boils down to, in my opinion, Gary.
No, thank you. And Mitch, I'm going to come at you for the kind of the last word then, before I wrap up. So if we were, everything we've covered tonight, everything we've talked about, if there was one thing that we've talked about that you think of the biggest impact on the season going forward, what will it be?
Oh, now we're putting me in the spot. I think players playing in the right positions. No, I don't want to see square pegs, round holes anymore, unless it's for a one-game stopgap. If we are serious about the player training model that we've got and kicking on to redevelop this team for 2-3 seasons on, play players in the proper positions. No, I don't want to see Sterling in the midfield because he's not a midfielder. He's a defender. Play him across the back line anywhere. Doug, don't shout at me with stats. But I want to see players playing in the right positions. I want to see them playing regularly. I want to see rotation within the squad. And I also want to see, I don't know, I don't want to use a word here because I'll get the channel banned if I use it there. I want to see the manager, if somebody's out of form, rip them out the team. Don't put them in blast in a press conference. Take them out the team, give them a game or two, let them sort their head, bring them back in. I think there's going to be periods of time during this season that, given the age of the squad and given the lack of maturity and lack of probably top flight game experience is probably the best way I can put it. There will be times where some of these young players will need taking out the frying pan. Young players like Yefty, if he's going to have a game or two where, right now, Tom will touch on it earlier, he seems to be a yellow card magnet. If that looks like there's a narrative forming around him, take him out the team for a couple of games and put him in with one of our coaches to say, look, you're becoming the magnet. We need to take you out for a couple of weeks just while we hone in on this bit here and show you what's acceptable in Scotland and what's not acceptable. Someone else is capable of stepping in for a few weeks. So I think probably on-field players in the right positions and knowing when to take somebody out the firing line, whether that be that they're out of form or whether that be that they need to maybe save from themselves.
So right positions and use them properly. Just to not proper as in proper.
Summarise.
Yes, right. And I'm conscious of the time, so we are going to finish now. So I'd like to thank our three guests for joining us tonight, and we are back tomorrow night with a Q&A session. Well, some of the members are back tomorrow night for a Q&A session. As always, like, subscribe, follow, tell your friends, all the stuff that goes with it. You will find us, and hopefully you have enjoyed tonight's. It's a little bit more cathartic than maybe the rants of Monday night, with some thoughts and suggestions going forward. So again, thank you, Tomo, Doug and Mitch. Every night is a Rangers Journal night. Thank you and good night.